What's up? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Shred Show Live. Look at the bright, smiling faces. I love when I have all kinds of fun people joining me. I've got the ever-talented and beautiful Molly Dowdy joining me from Next Mortgage Events. I've got the ever-entertaining and always full of a good time Jacob Gaffney. And then Mr. Serious, Mr. Knowledge himself, Rick Sharga joining us from Realty Track. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a lot to cover this morning. If you didn't already know, our industry, there's some really interesting things going on. The market is hotter than ever. It's more competitive than ever. And there's some things that you need to know. And this morning, we are setting the record straight. Ladies and gentlemen, volume's up. Add your realtor friends, tag your lender friends, because this discussion is about to change your life. Let's go shred. Mr. Jacob Gaffney, is not very often that you and I have the opportunity to do 2 shows a week, but this week there's so many things going on that we need to make our entire industry aware of this. And we have 2 of the absolute best people, 2 of the most absolutely, in my opinion, probably some of the most talented people with us on the call this morning on the show. So we're going to be diving into a lot of different things. But Jacob, our market, we all know it. It's kind of a buzz in the industry right now, but our market is hot. The industry is hot. And we're going to be setting the record straight on a few things, right?
We are setting the record straight with Rick Sharga, who is here with us. He's got something new, something very exclusive to share. But Molly, you were as always such a great audience member of our show 2 days ago, and you put some comments in there that could not be ignored, could not be denied. Had some very interesting take on our otherwise interesting conversation. So, look, Jerry's joining in too. Always, we've got top talent on this call. So, Josh, you and I should probably stop talking. Let them talk about it. Let's talk about setting the record straight. Okay, we talk often about the Wall Street Journal, who said that pension funds are looking to buy in the industry, creating unfair competition. Can't compete, can't do that. There is definitely difficulty in trying to buy property. There are reasons that people can't buy and sell as usual. The market is hot, but in many ways it's overheated. It's not a bubble, but it's definitely stagnant in many ways. And we're going to set the record straight right now. We've got people who are going to set the record straight. We know Rick has something exclusive for us. That's going to be great. And Molly, we're going to open with you. Tell us about what's happening. Set the table for us in your neck of the woods. What are you experiencing right now?
Before Molly does, though, I don't want to interrupt her. Molly, you shared this with me. And ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't seen this yet, this is a perfect video explaining kind of our market right now. So I'm going to share this with everybody. I say, Molly, is it okay if I share it first before you go?
Please do. I think it sets the stage.
Yeah, this is a perfect example of what is going on right now. So here we go.
Yeah, we're about to put it on sale right now, actually. Well, I'm in the market, so tell me about your Apple. Why should I buy it? Nice try. Okay, people, here's how this is going to work. I have an Apple here. The highest bidder's going home with this. I want all bids in the next 2 minutes, then we're closing it. Bidding starts at $5.
Feeling pretty confident there, huh? I mean, don't you think?
$10.
He said starting at $5.
15. New Apple? Yeah, just listed. I'm pre-qualified. I'll pay cash. I got cash. 20, 30, 40. No, just make it 45.
Is it even worth that?
50. I don't know. Please, this is the 8th Apple I've tried to buy.
Could I at least see it up close?
Nope, it's an Apple. You know what it is. You either want it or you don't. I'll take it for 100.
What? I'm from California. It's the cheapest Apple I've ever seen.
120.
Why did I do that? Why? I don't.
Oh. All right, Molly,
Right?
let's chat. This is literally what basically happened to you, right?
Yes, and it's happening everywhere. I mean, I'm hearing about it and reading about it constantly. Houses are going far above list price, no appraisal, all cash. And it happened to me this weekend. We were trying to buy a rent house, and it was a terrible hellscape. My husband prefers it that way so he can fix it up, and he thinks he's getting a good deal. And he's sort of a hoarder, so he thinks there might be good stuff in there too, probably. We put in an offer. There were 70 offers within 12 hours. It went for 20% over list, everything waived, no contingencies. So it happened to us. Think about what's happening to regular people who are looking for a home to live in, communities of color, places who don't have the same opportunities that we do, or that the investors that our Rick's customers do, regular people looking for a house. It's having a huge impact. We're going to address part of that, especially in the impact it has on communities of color at next summer 21. We have a session coming up with Tony Thompson with NAMBA. He's amazing and is going to share all kinds of statistics. Delilah Ramos at Planet Home Lending and Keosha Burns at Citi. We're going to talk about this, how this will impact communities of color and the impact that it's having now. And there are a variety of issues that are really having an impact on the ladder. And I just want to talk really quickly about what I mean about the ladder. All four of us here and everybody listening, I see as part of a ladder to home ownership, a ladder out of generational poverty and into the American dream, into working middle class, and into the possibility of building generational wealth. It's the single largest investment a family can make. And we all believe that it's the best investment a family can make. So we have a duty. If pieces of the ladder are broken, we have a personal responsibility to put cones up, let people know, hey, this isn't working right now. We're working on it, but come to this part of the ladder and we'll get you where you need to go. So it's opportunity for the mortgage industry, definitely, but we've got to honor those opportunities for regular working class people looking for a home, communities of color looking for a home. I think that's an important responsibility that all of us take. And it's really our mission. And it's an honor to be part of that ladder. So
I agree. What better opportunity as us, as mortgage professionals, as real estate professionals, having these discussions, opening it up to actually setting the record straight, which we're going to do here, just like with Rick Sharga. But Molly, I mean, the fact that you went through an experience like this, you know, there's a lot of talk about it, but I want
to make a point though. I want to make a point. It really doesn't matter what the data says or doesn't say at this point. The market has a PR problem. People are talking about it. Perception is reality. We have got to correct the perception. So I'm glad to be on this show and setting the record straight. But if the ladder isn't broken, it's also our responsibility to correct that perception and help people.
For sure. No, I think that's just it. I think when it comes to the world of media, when it comes to the world of discussions like this, it is our opportunity. And all of us have a voice in it. I mean, Molly, Rick, Jacob, myself, we have the opportunity as leaders, as people who, you know, whether you call it influence, whatever, impact, whatever it may be, it is our opportunity to be having the discussion and making sure that people understand what's actually happening here. So really, as always, we always continue. Go ahead.
Directly helping people get into homes. We all have that opportunity to really change lives. And I think about when we all think about what we're doing with our lives, that is so impactful. We have a huge opportunity. So
the opportunities
I remember at the end of the last crisis, people had to rent. You know, they needed to rent to get to the property ladder. The rate of conversion shows that they did eventually buy. It took a lot longer than we would have liked, but now about half of the 78 million or so millennials are now homeowners. So we've had success, but now we've kind of stopped. And without being able to rent those single family homes, people can't really experience the beauty of home ownership. They don't get the same when they're in some kind of block tower that's got everything they need. And Rick raised his hand, but that's exactly where Rick comes in, right? Because he knows this market better than any of us at all. He's got data to support it.
And I don't want to get to the pension funds just yet. You were talking about that earlier, Jacob, but Molly makes some great points. And we do all have an opportunity to improve other people's lives, which is great. The data is important though. And I think PR issues with the industry has aside, we are making progress, believe it or not. Jacob, you mentioned an interesting point about the millennials. Over 35% of home sales right now are to first-time buyers, which you would never get from the press coverage. First-time buyers do have the biggest challenges because, excuse me, entry-level inventory is at historically low levels. There's nothing to buy. So the fact that 35% of the buyers are first-timers who don't have equity to use to trade up to a new home is pretty significant. And the industry has done a remarkable job of creating the widest range of low down payment loan products really in history, forgetting about the subprime mortgage crisis, which was just bad lending. Let's forget about those kind of loans. But low down payment loans, no down payment loans available to veterans and their families. It's really helping a lot of people get into the market. And one of the points to reference here is that Hispanic homeownership has gone up every year for about 5 years in a row now. And Black homeownership, which really has been lagging behind every other group, has actually shown positive growth in the last year. That's the first time that's happened in quite some time. So I think people are starting to get the message. And I do think there are challenges for people of all color at the lower end of the economic scale. Prices have gone up 17% year over year for homes. That makes it really, really difficult for people to get into that first house. And we're seeing things from the Biden administration. We're seeing things, programs through HUD to help people start to move into that level. But the rental thing can't be overlooked. I remember one of the things Barney Frank said on the way out of office, and he was one of the writers of the Dodd-Frank legislation that tried to rein in some of the lending excesses we saw 10 years ago, was that affordable housing had to apply to rentals as much as it did to ownership. And that was a problem. When you have 30% of renters paying 50% of their income to rent an apartment, to rent a property, they never have the opportunity to save up enough money to buy their first house. So I think you're going to see a lot of activity coming out of DC in the next 4 years that's aimed at providing affordable rental opportunities for people as a step toward their eventual home ownership. And I think that'll help a little bit as well.
These minorities who are buying homes that you're talking about, the Black communities and Hispanic communities, how are their offers competing in this market? That just seems impossible. If they have a FHA or a non-traditional financing, a government program, that offer wouldn't even be seen if there are so many cash offers and things are going above list price. At 20% above list price is right out of that would be out of someone's price range totally. So it's confusing.
Well, it seems impossible. And that's why it's important to separate anecdotal information from what we're actually seeing in the numbers. How are they doing it? I have honestly no idea. It could be because they're making headway in markets that aren't quite as oversubscribed as some of the ones we're talking about. But I really don't know. All I can tell you is that the data is showing improvement, not to where everything's on an even playing field yet. Far from it. We're still talking about home ownership rates that are, 20 percentage points, 25 percentage points lower than average. So there's a long way to go. All I'm saying is it's not all gloom and doom. There actually is positive movement happening. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in the problems we see people having that we forget to look at the good side of things. And there has been some progress made. That will all go by the boards if home prices keep going up double digits year over year. We've gotten away with those kind of increases because wages have gone up over the last decade, and because interest rates are historically low, and that makes affordability more possible. But the biggest problem we have is something that you and your husband encountered trying to buy a property. There's way more demand than there is available supply. And until people start listing their homes for sale, until the builders start coming through with more and more properties that are being constructed, that problem is just not going to go away, and it's going to take some time. So I wish there were a magic formula we could sprinkle over the housing market and make it all work for everybody. But one of the things we have to be careful about is not overcorrecting. The mortgage crisis that we went through 10 years ago was in part because we gave loans to people to buy houses who weren't financially ready for the burden of home ownership. And I would submit that as wonderful as it is to get somebody into a house, the most devastating thing you can do is to take that house away because financially they couldn't handle it. There's probably nothing worse than crushing somebody's dreams by foreclosing on them. And we don't want to put people into homes where that's going to be a real risk. So there's a balancing act here. We want to get everybody who's ready for home ownership the opportunity to own a home, but we don't want to put people in before they're ready because we don't want to have them lose it. And that's why, to Jacob's point, it took people a lot longer to move from renter to homeowner because they were in foreclosure, and it took them 7 years to be able to get a new loan if they got their financial house in order. So lenders have a really challenging balancing act that they have to master, which is helping everybody who's ready get into a house, and helping people manage their finances in a way that gets them ready in the first place, so they don't crash and burn once they're there.
Well, and I think to Molly's point, that's probably one of those things is like having a discussion and really starting to educate not only our industry, but educating everybody on this, on what's going on. And that's why, why we're doing what we're doing today is because the discussions, we're just not seeing them. So as industry professionals, as people who actually have, the knowledge and expertise behind it, starting to really put it out there, starting to have, and whether we're the, first people to start having these discussions, that's what we want to have. We want to start educating our entire industry about it. So, Molly, did you have something? I thought you were going to say something there. Did I interrupt you?
No, just that I don't think anybody wants people who aren't ready to be in homes. That is a terrible situation. But there are millions of people who are ready, who aren't able to get in at this time.
Sure.
And it's true. We can look at data in multiple ways, but the reality is, and everybody's talking about it, multiple offers, over list price, all cash. It's all over the place right now.
Well, that was the great takeaway for me personally when I saw the Realty Track Individual Investor Survey that came out, that was featured in Bloomberg. Rick, your company surveyed nearly 150 investors nationwide, right? And the biggest takeaway for me is that access to capital was not an issue. Right. So that's definitely something new. The market is awash with cash. And we spent all of this time talking about the buyer experience, be it the minority first-time home buyer, be it the investor. But let's not discount what the seller brings to the table as well. So Molly, to your point, how are they getting homes? Well, the seller would probably, you have an investor here who's willing to pay, got the cash, got ready, you don't need to wait 30, 45 days to close, right? But then you have this nice family, they've got a little puppy or a baby in the picture with the offer letter. You could see where you could be swayed that way. Maybe I do have the time. So potentially what's not being variable is that good old fashioned sellers may have a preference one way or another, right?
Well, money talks. But I'm sure it happens. It might that happens, I'm sure. Sometimes.
It does. And actually there's some concern among regulators that those love letters that the buyers send in could actually have some racial implications too, that's keeping people of color out of properties because sellers want to sell to somebody like them. So there's all sorts of issues with that. I think the interesting part of the survey, Jacob, goes back to the first thing we were talking about today, which is why is there a lack of inventory? Is it because big investors, institutional investors, pension funds, private equity firms are gobbling up all this inventory, or is it because of all those crazy individual investors who are hoarders like Molly's husband, who are going up and gobbling all these properties up? And the reality is,
we can't.
No, they can't. Look, there was somebody who knows better wrote a column in an industry trade publication a couple of weeks ago talking about institutional investors being a real problem here. And let's talk about that single family rental market. There's 19 million single family rental units being rented out today. 19 million. Do you know how many of those are owned by big institutional investors? 200,000. And that number hasn't changed much over the last 10 years, plus or minus, a couple percentage points. So the institutional investors own about 1% of all of those single family rental units that are out there. The rest are owned by mom and pop investors who own between 1 and 10 of those properties. And the biggest competition the mom and pop investors like Molly and her husband are running into today is that the average consumer is competing with them very often with higher prices than the investors are offering, and very often coming in with cash purchases. So a cash purchase does not necessarily mean it's an investor making the buy. You have California had a net loss in population last year for the first time in quite some time. People are cashing out their homes in San Jose, in Silicon Valley, in Newport Beach, in San Francisco. They're taking that cash and they're buying a home for cash in, as Molly found out, Oklahoma City or Salt Lake City or Boise, Idaho, or other lower priced markets. So those people who are owner occupants, who are homeowners, are actually coming in with cash offers and pushing investors to the sidelines. And as Molly said, for somebody who's coming in with an FHA loan, with a VA loan, with a USDA loan out in rural markets, it's really hard for them to compete in today's market. But I would submit that the issue really isn't favoritism. It really isn't evil investors. There's just nothing to buy right now. So this is, unfortunately, Econ 101. When you have more people looking to buy than you have available product to sell, prices go up. It's going to block some people out of the market. The good news is housing starts. The last number we saw from a housing start perspective was 1.7 million units. That would be about twice what we've seen on a yearly basis since the Great Recession. So stuff's coming. It's taken time, and it's frustrating for people trying to get into the market.
So is it just a patience issue, Rick? Is it something that we need to be like, hey, it's coming, we keep hearing it's coming? You mentioned this earlier, there's a lot of doom and gloom right now. There's a lot of, uncertainty, but I guess, where is the positive in all this? What can we be looking forward to as an industry? Is there positivity here? I mean, what do we do about this? I mean, having discussion is one thing, but what can be done?
I don't want to get into a political discussion, but there are aspects of President Biden's programs that are encouraging public-private partnerships in underserved communities, where the government will come in with grants, and I think they've set aside something like $40 billion in grants to entice people to build affordable housing units in underserved communities. One of the biggest challenges we're going to have is that a lot of zoning laws, which are created at the local level, have got to be wiped out in order for people to be able to build affordable housing units in those areas. So there's that the Biden approach is to dangle a carrot and say, we'll give you lots and lots of federal money if you will accommodate this kind of building. The other thing that's missing, we always blame the builders for lack of inventory, and we should, because they've underbuilt for a decade now. But keep in mind that 80 to 90% of home sales normally are existing home sales, not new home sales. And the fact of the matter is that right now we have an historically low level of existing homes being put onto the market for sale. Whether that's because psychologically people are afraid to list their house because they're not sure there's anything for them to buy, or because of the pandemic. And I do believe that's been a factor. The research has suggested that people are concerned about strangers coming into their home in open houses to take a look. They're concerned themselves about going to visit somebody else's home that they might be interested in buying because they don't want to catch COVID-19. So as the vaccination program it continues to roll out, as we kind of sort of feel like the pandemic's getting under control, I do expect to see more existing homeowners put their properties on the market. And that starts the priming the pump. That starts opening up one of those rungs on the ladder that Molly talked about. We do have people who live in entry-level properties who would be able to sell that property in a heartbeat if they put it on the market. They just have to have the confidence that they're going to continue to be employed, because COVID's not going to shut down their place of employment, and that it's safe to list their house for sale. And I do think you'll start to see some of those properties come back on the market. Speculation right now, probably not until the fall, but we should see probably a higher than usual level of homes for sale for the last half of this year, which will start to help things a little bit. None of these are it's going to take time.
Yeah, this is an interesting point, Rick, because actually we have friends, being a millennial myself, being of, younger 30s, some of our friends right now, they're still in their starter home, but they're worried about listing their house because they're like, well, if I sell my house, I can get top dollar for it, but can I actually even go find a house just because limited inventory? So I can count at least 5 of our friends who same exact thing that you just mentioned here. I mean, factual, they want to sell, they're ready to sell, their jobs are secure, but they're scared. They can't even find anything. They're like Molly, they're going to these open houses. And actually, Molly, I'd love to hear this. I don't want to be this a focal point by any means, but as you've done this home search, has COVID been a big thing? Like, are you able to go into homes? Are you able to see these homes? I know here in Utah, a lot of them, like realtors, are just doing like a virtual tour for open houses. What are some of the things that you've seen in your market?
I'm telling you guys, no, because they're sold before we can even get in.
That's crazy.
Yes.
See, and
we haven't even had to cross that bridge because they're sold already.
See, and I think so. I mean, is there, can it even be like, is there a way to overcome that other than, like I mentioned, just being patient? Is patience the key here of waiting and just playing a waiting game? But if that's the case, go ahead, Molly.
I think there are some short-term solutions that we should look at for everybody. And I don't know exactly how this works, but there are a few lenders who there's a new lender in Austin called Up Equity, and they provide to a home buyer a cash offer ability. So I don't know how that works, but they're able to go and offer cash to compete with those other cash offers. So ideas like that, or different lending programs that'll help people compete in the short term, I think those are worth looking into too.
Just for people listening, be very careful with those programs. I don't know that Up Equity is one of these companies, but a lot of the companies who offer those programs are offering it on a shared equity basis. So in exchange for getting the cash to buy your home, you're giving up voluntarily some of the equity that you're going to build, which is one of the reasons we want people to be able to own a home, so they can build that equity and create their own wealth and intergenerational wealth. So just look at the fine print.
Great trade-off if that's your only way in,
But it needs to be an educated, it needs to be an informed decision. Don't be surprised later to learn that you've given up equity in your property. Just understand what you're getting into before you get into it.
It's interesting
and the issue, Josh, is really pretty simple overall. There are probably fewer than 1 million properties available for sale nationally right now. If you look at a month snapshot,
wow,
that's somewhere between 2 and 3 million properties less than what we would see normally. And I mean, it's a huge number, and buying demand is actually higher than normal. So if you look at months of supply, we're really below 2 months supply, where in a normal market, there'd be 6 months supply. So it's really hard to overstate just how dramatic the lack of inventory is and how hard it's making for everybody who's interested in buying a house to buy a house, unless they want to buy a multi-million-dollar house because the luxury market still has enough supply. But everything else, particularly the stuff Molly's talking about, entry-level prices, low-price properties, historically low levels of stuff available to buy.
So Molly mentions something interesting, is like, because I'm not going to mention the company. There's a company here in Utah that has a very similar program, and they have already got the reputation of like, hey, make sure you read the fine print. Like you said, Rick, like some of these programs, it may offer you, people who are wanting to move up, but you have to be very, very careful of these programs. Make sure that you understand what you're getting yourself into. I know this one in particular is taking a 50% equity stake in the home you purchase, which is huge. And people have no idea about it until one of our good friends, they reached out to us and said, hey, we just signed this. Like, what are your thoughts on this? And I'm like, holy crap. Do you have any idea what you just signed? Like, so Audrey Boisano, good friend over in California, the CMBA, says, I agree, be very careful with those programs. I think the cost of lumber is also slowing the new construction by Randy Vyers. These are all things that are, all points to bring up. Again, this discussion in particular, I love it. I'm excited for it because, again, I think there is a lot, going back to your point, Rick, there's just a lot of, knowledge, or there's a lot of education that needs to be shared and need to be discussed, because to Molly's point, there are programs available. And, I think we'll continue to see more creative programs come out on the market, but we just need to be cautious of them. The last thing we want is to rush anybody into any type of program that's going to get them into a situation that is not favorable. Because going back to your point, Rick, that's what got us into the place where we were a few years ago.
It's a balancing act. I do think there are a lot of programs that are available today that make affordability more likely for people entering the market. I really do believe that the biggest problem facing everybody trying to get that first house is really there's nothing to buy, and it's not a conspiracy. It's not something people are trying to do on purpose to keep buyers out of the market. It's just there's look the millennial there are two groups that are driving all of this. It's the millennials and it's Gen X. Millennials are the biggest group of millennials are reaching the prime age to be a first-time home buyer. So the biggest generation in history has the biggest cohort of people in that generation all hitting prime home ownership age at the same time. At the same time, the Gen X generation, which was pretty big on its own, is hitting the prime age for move-up purchase. So if you look at those demographic trends, that's driving a lot of the demand. You layer on top of that, sub 3% interest rates, and everybody who was thinking about maybe buying a house all of a sudden says, well, now's the time because look at the interest rates. Our parent company, Adam Data, did some research recently that showed in about half of the markets across the country, more than half, your monthly payment on a 30-year fixed rate loan is actually lower than what your rental cost would be in those markets. So it's really driving a lot of people who would probably still be renters into the market at the same time. And we have all that while we have, a 10-year deficit in home building. It's like a perfect storm. And unfortunately, people at the lower end of the economic scale are the ones suffering the most because they're just unable to compete in this kind of frenzy.
We have to find ways to fix that.
And so, Molly, you bring up a good point. I mean, you look at the collective knowledge on this call. I know are we the smartest people in the industry? Absolutely not. I don't know. Rick and Molly, you're probably up there with the smartest, but me and Jacob, by hell, we know that's not the case. So is it these discussions that help with that, Molly? What is pushing us? And I know Rick in particular, you have a few other things that we were going to discuss as we set this record straight. But I think the discussion that you're saying, Molly, it needs to be like, we need to get more people involved with this because I'm sure there are solutions. Hey, we're a pretty smart industry. We've been through a lot of shit together as an industry, and I'm sure we can figure out a solution if we put our heads together. So, but again, going back to Rick, I know there was a few other points that you wanted to set the record straight on to make sure we hit on.
I have to respond to that, and I know Molly's dying to say something, but I was at Realty Track during the foreclosure crisis. Mm-hmm. I got to see firsthand the carnage that bad lending practices help to facilitate. And I've seen people's lives destroyed because they took on a financial responsibility that they never should have been put into that position. That wasn't everybody, but I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that we have a responsibility to borrowers to make sure we're not putting them into a situation that really is going to end poorly for them.
Absolutely, but those are not equivocal. I mean, helping lower income people, those aren't the same thing.
No, it's not. No, there's a response. My point, Molly, is there's a responsible way to do it. And we have to be careful not to overdo it, or we'll cause more harm than good to the people that we're trying to help. I completely look. I have two adult children. Right? There is no way in God's green earth they can afford a house where I live. I'm not sure if I had to buy my house today, I'd be able to afford it. So the dynamics are all completely screwed up. I completely get what you're talking about, and my kids are fortunate. They're not struggling. They're not with a family that can barely make ends meet. So there are millions of people out there who would love a shot at home ownership. We need to do what we can to give everybody that opportunity who's ready for that opportunity. I just, having seen so much pain the last cycle, seeing 6 million people lose their homes, and a lot of them really through almost no fault of their own, I just want us to be careful not to create that kind of mess again, because it becomes a multi-generational problem rather than a multi-generational solution. So I want us to be careful about, we have to be creative in coming up with new approaches and new solutions, but we have to be cautious at the same time so we don't cause more harm than good. Let's take the Hippocratic Oath here. first, cause no harm, and kind of take it from there.
I think that's a good point, Rick, is we don't, as industry professionals, we all have such a love and devotion, every single one of us in our different spheres. We love this industry. We want to see this industry thrive, but we have to be cautious of it. We have to be of what is to come. We need to Molly's point too, we need to come together. We need to have the discussions that are actually going to move the needle, because if not, nothing is going to happen. And like I said, unless we're just sitting on our hands playing the patience game, nothing is going to happen. And the people with the money, let's just be honest, the people with the money will continue to dictate what happens.
That's exactly it. It's the people with cash to pay right now.
So,
exactly
and Rick, to a good point, it's interesting looking at the statistics and looking at the numbers. It's not the big investors like we were expecting. It's, there's money in the world right now. So with that being said, there's a lot of,
if you look at barriers to home ownership, historically, the number one barrier has been lack of a down payment. Today, if you poll the same people, that's no longer the number one barrier. So there are down payment assistance programs and things like that can help people with the down payments. There are low down payment loan products available, but their biggest issue today is the same one the investors cite, which is there's nothing to buy. They're looking for properties, but there is nothing to buy. And mom and pop investors are citing the same problem. They're talking about lack of inventory. They're talking about the rising cost of homes, and they're talking about, ironically, they're talking about competition from consumers looking at buying the same homes. So we've never been in this kind of market before. I've been in the industry now for probably 25 years. I can tell you I've never seen a market like this. And people that have been in the industry much longer than me have kind of confirmed they haven't seen a market quite this crazy in their lifetimes either. So we go through these weird cycles. We're in the hottest sellers market in memory. Eventually, things start to level off. But in the meanwhile, you do have a lot of people frustrated by lack of opportunity, and it's a challenge.
Oh, 100%. So with that, we're going on like 36 minutes. We've had a lot of good discussion here. I know there's a lot more we could go into as we start to kind of wrap things up, kind of setting the record straight across the board. I want to give anybody kind of a last opportunity as we start to trend this down. This is just the beginning. As Molly's pointed out, Rick, I think there's a lot of good points that we've all brought up here. And really the headline is, this is just the beginning. Like we are going into unprecedented times, Rick, like you mentioned. You haven't seen this in all your time with all your expertise and knowledge in the industry. All that you've seen, we haven't seen this. We need to be having more discussion, as Molly has said. We need to be bringing people together who are educated and educating our industry. So there's lots of great points. Is anybody else want to kind of chime in as we, like I said, start to wrap things down here?
I'm going to let Molly have the last word, but I do want to point out one thing we could see that would be helpful. If the government's really interested in creating affordable housing for first-time buyers, and particularly buyers in underserved communities, they need to reach out to the builders and incent them to build affordable units. In every other market we've seen like this in the past, we would have seen builders by now start to build entry-level affordable housing. We're not seeing that right now. We're not seeing that because on average, it costs a builder $80,000 per property before they break ground. In California, that's $100,000. Really hard to build an affordable home if your table stakes before you start construction are $100,000. So if the government wants to do something to stimulate this kind of affordable housing, I think they need to create some programs that will help offset builder costs in some of these communities, and encourage the builders, incent the builders to build more affordable housing units.
There you go. Jacob, I agree. In true gentleman fashion, Rick is going to give the last word to Molly, which I love. Jacob, last thoughts?
No, I think, we've done our best to try to set the record straight on a very complicated issue with very confounding interest. But I'm happy if we all agree to blame people from California. I think that was our biggest takeaway. Is that, am I right there? I wasn't quite sure. I think it might be a little bit bigger than that, but I'm with Rick. We should give Molly the last word.
Love it. Molly, did you freeze? I just saw your screen freeze. I'm hoping you're not frozen. Oh no. We lost Molly. She's coming back. Okay, we got her. Hold on, ladies and gentlemen. Little technical difficulty there. We got Molly back.
Was it something I said?
Yeah, I was
Everybody
like, Jacob.
just disappeared, and I was like, wait.
Like, wait, hold on. We're just saying in true gentleman-like fashion, we're giving Molly the last word, and then she leaves. She's like, oh, we said something.
I'm out of here,
That was quite a last word.
I was like, she like mic drop. That was a perfect mic drop in the world. So with that, all right, Molly, we're going to go ahead and turn it to you for this last.
Well, I just really appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with everybody in the industry on these types of issues and to talk about these things and to keep these conversations going. I want to talk about them. Please reach out to me, connect to me, and let's keep talking about creative ideas, solutions, and ways to help people get into home. People who, yes, a lot more people now than our.
Oh, we might have lost Molly again, but there she is. Now she came back. To reiterate her point, I absolutely agree. Let's continue. I love this discussion. Were we all on the same page all at the same time? No, but we respect each other. We appreciate one another. And as we continue to support, and again, having our own unique opinions is absolutely what helps us grow and learn from each other, looking at the facts, having the discussions, educating one another on this. This is how we strive. This is how we grow and thrive as an industry. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you. We love you. Huge shout out to Molly Dowdy of Next Mortgage Events. Huge shout out to Jacob Gaffney. And again, huge shout out to our good friend Rick Sharga over at Realty Track. Much more to come. And like Molly said, this is not the last discussion. We are just beginning, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate you. We love you. Now it's time for all of you to go shred, go show up, hustle, repeat every day. See ya.